And in his eyes, you just see this joy as a smile is across his face. And looking him in the eyes, it's like you could be the only person in the world when you talk to him. Because you can tell that he just has love wrapped around you. So he comes in, he introduces himself as Jesus, and then he's followed by this entourage of people, upwards of 12. You get introduced to everybody as they come in, but there's only a few people who you really remember. The first person right after Jesus, you remember him. He was all up in your face. He was like, "Hi, my name's Peter. How are you doing today?" You remember that there were a lot of people named Mary, and you remember that the youngest one, his name was John. Man, he couldn't have been older than like 15, 14. You do remember one other person. You can't remember their name, but you just remember them walking into the room while everybody else seems so excited. Everybody else seems so happy and just ready for this moment. There was one guy who, while he put it on, like he put on this display of being happy, it just seemed like something was troubling him. So as everybody comes in, Jesus turns to you and he says, hey, can you come here really quick? Can you go run and grab me like a bowl and a pitcher with water, maybe some towels? You kind of look at it. Okay. So you run off, you grab the bowl and pitcher of towels. And you bring them to Jesus, and immediately Jesus takes the robe off the top of his body and gets down on his feet in front of everybody else, in front of the rest of the guests, and gets down on his hands and knees in front of them and begins to wash their feet. The first person who he approaches is Peter. And as he goes to go wash Peter's feet, Peter's like, no, 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 no. Jesus, you don't wash my feet. That's not how this works. You don't wash my feet. You are not the servant here. I am your servant. You don't wash my feet. And Jesus kind of just goes, oh, Peter, 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 Peter. Peter, you don't get it. If I don't wash your feet, then you will not be with me. You cannot be with me in heaven if I don't wash your feet. And then Peter's like, all right, if that's the case, if that's the case, wash my whole body. That'll do it. Once again, Jesus is just like, oh, Peter, come on. Hey, you wash your body all the time. You've been walking outside for weeks now. Your feet are disgusting. Everybody washes their entire bodies, but I am going to wash your feet. So Peter gets his feet washed. And Jesus then goes down the line washing people's feet. And as he's doing it, you're sitting there going, what is happening? Isn't this man supposed to be the leader? Isn't he supposed to be the rabbi, the teacher of this group? I mean, if that's the case, then shouldn't they be washing his feet? This is backwards. The lowest of them should be washing the feet, not the rabbi, not the teacher, not the person on top. So then everybody goes and they sit down at table. And you're so used to the Passover. You've done the Passover ceremony every year since you were a child. You know the words by heart. You know the actions by heart. And so while everything that is happening, you're sitting there listening to it going, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, I know all of this. There just seems to be something different, something that isn't quite normal. So, as you know, there's 4 cups in the Passover, and as you're going, each cup is proceeding as normal until you get to the 3rd cup. When Jesus takes the 3rd cup, the cup of blessing, before he takes it, he takes the bread and he lifts it up in prayer. He blesses it and breaks it, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it. For this is my body, which will be given up for you." And you're like, wow, that's weird. And Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it and he passes it around the table as his friends eat it. You can see that their faces kind of light up and they turn back to Jesus. Once everybody's eaten, Jesus turns to you with a piece of this bread and he looks at you and he says, "Take this and eat of it. This is my body." And so you take the piece of bread and you eat it. When you do, it's like you're seeing Jesus in a whole new light. It's like for the first time, you know God. And then Jesus takes the cup of blessing and he raises it and he prays over it, blessing it. And then he turns to his friends and says, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the covenant, which will be given up for you and for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me." And so Jesus passes the cup to each of his friends. When it comes back around, Jesus takes the cup and turns to you and looks you in the eyes. And still you look into those eyes and it's like the entire room disappears. It's just you and him. As he looks at you and says, "This is my blood. Drink of it." You take it and you take but a small sip, but that small sip just completely changes the way that you are looking at this man, the way that you look at God, because all of a sudden it is like you are in a single relationship. It is like you are just fully, completely brought into one with God. Jesus places the cup down on the table. And he looks out at the crowd, or he looks out at his friends, and you see his face fall. Suddenly, sorry, I just realized that this is going to help the sound on Instagram. Suddenly, Jesus looks at his friends and says, "One of you will betray me." There's shocked silence that spreads across the table. And one person looks at another, like, one person turns to Jesus like, "It's not going to be me, right?" And then another, and they're like, no, it's not going to be me. I swear it's not going to be me. And Peter gets up and he speaks out over the crowd. He says, "Surely it's not I, Lord. I would never do that. I would never betray you." Jesus turns and looks at Peter And as he does, it's the first person Jesus has made eye contact with since he made his statement. The room goes silent. Peter, before this night is over, you will deny me 3 times. You will deny that you ever knew me. You'll deny everything that we have done together 3 times. Before the cock crows. Peter's like, I would never, Lord. I would never do that. And Jesus kind of just looks at Peter with a sad smile. Then another voice pipes up. Rabbi, surely it is not I. It's the man from before who seemed to be a little bit off. And something clicks in your head as he says it. It's that for some reason, he referenced Jesus not as Lord as the rest have, but as Rabbi, as teacher. And Jesus just simply looks at him and says, if you say so. All of a sudden, everybody turns and looks at this man. Who it's clicking back in your head. His name is Judas. They turn and look at Judas, and Judas looks around the table and gets up and runs out of the room. Now, everybody just sits there in silence and in shock that one of their own betrayed Jesus. The festive mood is now gone, but the Passover isn't finished. But instead of finishing the ceremony, Jesus stands up, says, let's go pray. So they all get up and they leave. And as they're leaving, you're like, wait, no, this can't be it. So you run over to your boss and you're like, hey, look, I understand they just left. And I understand that I've got things that I've got to do here, but please, just let me go after him. I feel like I need to follow after him. Your boss kind of just looks at you and smiles and says, go, we'll take care of you, go. So you take off after them, keeping to the shadows so that they don't see you following. And you follow them to this cave at the entrance to a garden. And Jesus seems to be talking to his friends. And he says, hey guys, just stay. Just stay here. You 3 come with me. Guys, just sit and pray for me. Pray for everything that's happening. And pray for yourselves. So Jesus goes deeper goes and enters into this garden. And you still follow after Jesus, keeping to the shadows. And you see him stop with the 3. And when he stops, he says, just stay here and pray with me. Pray that you don't come into the judgment. And Jesus then leaves them and goes further. And you continue to keep to the shadows as you follow after him until you just see Jesus fall to the ground, fall to his knees. And you could hear his sobs. You can hear him whispering something, but you can only catch a few words of it. Cup. Pass. Will. And you sit there and you are present and just trying to say, God, what is happening right now? What is happening with this man? And so he gets up and he walks back to the three. When he gets back to them, he finds them asleep. Kind of kicks them awake. Guys, could you not stay awake with me? Come on, it's only been like half an hour. Like, couldn't stay awake with me? Please stay awake and pray with me, please. So Jesus then goes back out. And this time when he falls to the ground, he not only lands on his knees, but his face goes into his hands, pressed firmly against the ground. Your Father, pass. Your will. This time when Jesus gets up, it's like there's a dark shimmer around him, a dark glisten to his skin. You would say it's sweat, but it seems to be almost a black coating. As he walks back to his apostles, to the three, and this time he finds them asleep again. And so he walks back without even stirring them. And this time when he falls to the ground, he just lets his entire body lay flat, as if it were a cloth or a palm laid before a king entering into a kingdom. Abba, Father, just let this cup pass. But may not my will, but yours be done. God, whatever you want, let that happen. I've told you what I want. You know what I want. Just whatever it is that you need to have happen, have it happen. May not my will, but yours be done. When Jesus gets back up, he looks over and you swear, but for a second, he catches your eye. And as he does, you would swear that just for that split second, you see a small smirk, the first that he's had since Judas. But it is gone just as quickly. Jesus goes back to the three and wakes them up. Says, let's go. You can see the shame on their faces that they had fallen asleep. As they stir themselves and begin to follow after Jesus. Ducking behind trees, you can continue to follow after them. And as you begin to approach the cave, you find everybody there, some awake, some asleep. But in the distance, you see what has to be torchlight. When you get to the cave, you can tell that it is torchlight. In fact, there's a horde of people coming towards the cave. They get close, and one breaks through the crowd. Takes you a second, but you recognize him as Judas, and he walks up to Jesus and kisses him on the cheek. You hear Jesus say, this is how you do it? This is how you choose to betray me? With a sign of affection? Okay. Okay. You see Jesus' friends kind of scatter as they put chains on him. Begin to walk him into the city. They bring him to the temple area, and you're out in the courtyard out in front of the temple, and you catch a little bit of sleep as the night goes on, but you're so anxious as to what's happening with Jesus and to make sure that you don't miss him and his obviously what's going to be a release. And you, at one point, you see someone walking by. You say, hey, I know you. I know you. You're Peter. You're Peter. You were with Jesus. You see shock come across Peter's face. I don't know what you're talking about. I never knew the man. And immediately the cock crows. You see realization hit Peter's face. His eyes go wide. He turns to run. But as he does, the gates open. Jesus is processed out. You look from Peter to Jesus, and you see the brokenness on Jesus' face. And you know that it's not from anything that happened inside, but from the look in Peter's eyes and Jesus knowing what just happened. Peter continues to run away. And you follow Jesus. They take him to the court of Pontius Pilate. They take him to the court of Pontius Pilate. And you're able to just barely sneak in the door because obviously everybody knows this man, so everybody wants to hear what he's been accused of. You just get in the gates before they close them. And up towards the front, you can see Pilate, the governor, standing with Jesus. Pilate says, all right. I've spoken with Jesus, and I don't think that there is anything that he has done wrong. I don't see any fault in this man. And so, but the crowd looks at Pilate and says, we want him crucified. And another man says, yeah, crucify him. All of a sudden, a chant begins to come up, crucify him, crucify him. And before you know it, you're taken away by the crowd screaming, crucify him, before you realize what exactly you're saying. Pilate says, how about this? I will not crucify him, but I'll give him to the scourging. 39 lashes. Which, you know, the 39 lashes is just short of a death sentence. So the crowd seems to cheer at this. You don't. But you immediately start pushing towards the area of the scourging. You sneak in and you watch as they bring Jesus out and strip him of his clothes and take his chains and chain him to a pillar. Then they pull out this band of leather with 9 strips falling from the hand. With 9 strips falling from the handle. On the end of each of the strips are pieces of glass or metal or bone. On one, you even see a fish hook. And you watch as they pull back and whip Jesus for the first time. As they do, you notice, well, as they do, your eyes turn away from the gruesome sight. And as your eyes turn away, you see a woman on the other side of the crowd. You look at her for but a moment because as soon as you look at her, your eyes are pulled back to the man being whipped. But in that moment, you could see her flinch as if the 9 tails were hitting her as well. In the background, you hear another. And then another. And you're watching as the flesh is being torn off of Jesus' back, as the pieces of bone and metal and glass are clamping into his flesh and then being ripped away. As the leather strips are planting themselves across the back, making the skin tender. You're watching as his back is just being torn away. Finally, with one last fall of the leather, they finish the 39th whip. You look and you see Jesus' chest still rising and falling, but he just collapsed on the ground. Well, at least as much as he can be with his hands chained. You look over to the woman and you see tears falling from her eyes and look of complete agony. But again, as you look at her, your eyes are brought back into the beaten and battered body. So they take Jesus, they pull him back into the back room, and you shuffle out into the massive crowd once again. It takes a few minutes, but eventually they bring Jesus back out. And when they do, he's not in his old tunic. He's now covered in a purple tunic with a crown of thorns upon his head. It seems like they've been beating him more. And Pilate looks out at the crowd and says, "Is this not enough? Is what I have done here not enough? This man has suffered enough. Let him go." Once again from the crowd, you hear, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" This time you don't join in because you can't do that to yourself again. And Pilate says, okay, how about this? Every year on Passover, I release to you a prisoner. I could release to you Jesus, who I have found no fault in. Or, and as he says this, his servants bring out another man in chains. Or I could release to you the known rebel and murderer, a literal serial killer, Barabbas. And from the front, you hear, give us Barabbas. Yeah, give us Barabbas. We want Barabbas. You see as they come up, Pilate looks over at his servants. Okay, well, release Barabbas. As they come up and release Barabbas, Barabbas doesn't look over at Jesus like, oh, thank you. You've done so many great things for me. You've set me free. No, Barabbas walks out like, yeah, that's right. My people love me. That's right. This crowd right here, they love me. It's because they want me to come back. You look at Jesus who just looks at him with the same loving gaze that he looked at you with. And so Pilate then turns to a basin of water and says, I wash my hands of this. Take him. Do with him what you will. And walks back inside. So you watch as the crowd takes him away, takes Jesus away, mocking him, jeering at him. And you watch as they take a cross and they drop it on his back, and immediately he falls to the ground, his weakened body not being able to hold up the weight. Now the weight of the cross is pressed against him, pressed against the wounds in his back. But you see him get up. And as he's getting up, you see a woman break through the crowd. In fact, it's the same woman from the scourging. She goes up and she drops to her knees and holds Jesus' head in her hands, and their eyes meet. And for a moment, everything else goes away. For a moment, all that exists are these two. Because the love between them is so palpable, so real, that time seems to stop. And then that moment is broken as she's pulled away by the guards and thrown back into the crowd. Jesus then begins to take his first few steps. And sorry, where I am in my notes. And as Jesus staggers, getting up, they realize that he's not going to be able to go very far like this. He can barely stand up. And so they pull a random man out of the crowd and throw him at Jesus' feet, saying, help him carry the cross. This man's like, no, 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 no. I'm just a passerby. I don't even live here. You can't do this to me. And he turns to look at Jesus and he's like, I won't. Okay. Okay. I'll help him. And he stands up and he takes his first step helping Jesus, but they aren't exactly in line together. And Jesus ends up falling for the second time. While this man is holding the cross, it takes some of the weight off of Jesus' fallen body, but Jesus is still laying there. Jesus pulls himself back up to his feet. And as he is, another woman breaks through the crowd and takes out her apron and wipes his face. And as she walks away, you look at her and you see just surprise come across her face. As she looks down, she looks back at Jesus. And they begin to make Jesus walk. With each step, you feel like Jesus is going to fall again, but through everything, through the jeering, through the mocking of the crowd, through the constant pushing of the guards, Jesus continues to take each step. Until you're almost to Golgotha, the place of the skull, Calvary. And you see that he just can't keep going anymore. As he falls to the ground for the third time. But see, he's only a few feet away from where he needs to be. And so they tell the man to hold on to the cross as the soldiers go and they pick him up. They pick up Jesus and drag him the rest of the way. They then go and they grab the cross and they take it over. They put it on the ground. Taking Jesus, they pick him up and they lay him down upon the cross. And then they take out a nail. Brush it along his palm. And the nail drives into his hand. You're forced to look away. You can only imagine the pain. They then go to his other hand, and his hand won't reach the hole that it's supposed to get into, so they take a rope and they tie it to his wrist and pull until it reaches. And again, they then take his feet and overlap them and take a piece of wood, almost a slanted platform, and put it beneath his feet. They take another nail and drive it into his feet. You watch as they take Jesus and they flip him over. His face pressed into the ground by the cross. And they go and they pick him up. And you watch as they push the cross up until it drops into the hole. And you watch as it jeers Jesus, jostles Jesus on the cross, pulling at the wounds in his hand and on the wounds in his feet. You watch as he has to pull himself up on the wounds in his hands and push off the wounds in his feet in order to breathe. You watch as people come by mocking him, spitting at him. Off in the corner, you can see the soldiers gambling away everything that he owns. And then you see Jesus pull up, taking as big of a breath as he can. He says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Wait a second, what? Forgive these people? Jesus, I've seen everything they've done to you, at least most of it. How can you be asking God to forgive them? They've beaten you to the point of death and then forced you to carry a cross and then nailed you to it and dropped you in a hole, all the while mocking you, taking everything you own. How is it that you are asking God to forgive them? I don't get it. I don't get it. From the right, or from one of the men on hanging on either side of him, you hear, "Forgive them." So God's not going to forgive them, and He's not going to forgive us, and He's sure as heck not going to forgive you. And from the other side, you hear, "Dude, do you know who you're talking to? This man hasn't done anything wrong. We deserve to be up here. He doesn't." Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I'm sorry for the things that I've done. Remember me. Jesus turns his head to the man crucified who spoke. Today you will be with me in paradise. You see as almost a smile comes across the crucified man's face. As tears of joy begin to come down, pour from his face. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Some time passes, and you find that the woman who had approached Jesus, who was also there at the scourging, you vaguely think that she was maybe actually been at the dinner. Yeah, she was one of the Marys. She's now sitting at the feet of the cross with John, the youngest. Jesus looks at them, pulls himself up, and says, "Mother, behold your son." "Son, behold your mother." With that, Jesus, his eyes come off them, and he looks up at the crowd. He looks up at all the passersby. His eyes come, they lock on you, and they say, "Behold your mother." After about 3 hours, uh, You see Jesus once again pull himself up to take in breath to speak. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? Wait, something clicks in your head. Hold on a second. No, I know this scripture. I know this. It's from the Psalms. This is Psalm 22. This isn't a psalm of defeat. This isn't a psalm of death. This isn't even a psalm of sadness. This is a psalm of hope. This is a psalm of victory. How is this man who's been beaten to death and then nailed to a cross and is obviously soon to die, how is he preaching of victory? I don't get it. Then Jesus pulls himself up one last time. He turns his eyes to heaven. He says, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And you watch as the strangest thing happens. As Jesus breathes his last breath, his smile returns. You watch as his head falls, but a smile of pure joy breaks across his lips. Immediately, you're torn away from this moment as the ground beneath you begins to shake, as all of a sudden the once clear sky comes rolling in with thunderclouds. The rain begins to pour, and the thunder and lightning seem to crack across the sky. In the distance, you hear something that isn't like the sounding of the booming thunder, but it's almost as if it's a tearing. And you seem to think that for this moment, all of creation is mourning this man. You watch on as Mary and John hold each other, consoling each other. And after a few minutes of your own tears, you look up and you see Mary looking at you. She says, come here. Come weep with us. There's so few of us here to weep. Come weep with us. So you go over and join them. As they take Jesus down off the cross and lay him in his mother's arms. And you watch as that love that was so evident is still evident in her eyes as she looks down upon this man. As they take him and lay him in a new tomb. As they roll the stone to close the tomb. John looks at you. He says, you've been here the whole time. You were there at dinner. And tomorrow we're getting together. All of Jesus' friends, come join us. This is where we'll be. Come mourn with us. So you go home and your head hits your pillow and you fall right asleep because it's been almost 24 hours since you last slept. You wake up in the morning and you think, you know what, I'll do it. I'll take John up on the offer. And so you go to the house where they are. And John opens the door and says, oh, I'm so happy that you're here. So good to see you again. So glad you came. Here, let me reintroduce you to everybody. And he takes you around the room, introducing you to once again to Peter, whose face is just broken. He introduces you to all of the Marys and to all of the rest of Jesus's friends. And you sit down with them and they begin telling stories. They begin telling stories about Jesus. Say, oh man, do you remember this when remember when he healed that blind man? Yeah, man, oh, it was crazy. All right. So I remember whenever he like hawked that loogie and spit it on the ground, man, we were all back there like, oh, he's crazy. What is he doing? Like, why is he spitting on the ground? He like gets down, he's swirling his finger in it. It's like, Jesus, you know you're supposed to be healing this dude, right? Like, come on, right here. And she's like, I know what I'm doing. And he would like take the mud and he wiped it across the guy's eyes. And we're over here like, huh. That was a good one. Oh man. What about hey Peter, do you remember the time that you stole that kid's lunch? Yeah. The fishes and the loaves. When Jesus like, man, that was crazy. Jesus like was just like, what do we got to eat? And we're like, I don't know. And then Peter's like, well, this kid's got some lunch I can grab. Jesus is like, Peter. And the kid goes, no, you can have it. I was like, all right. Fishes, loaves. He did the whole like, God, please thing. And then there was enough for everybody. Oh man, dude, it was nuts. Or you see one of the other Marys speak up. She's like, yeah, I remember the first time I met Jesus. Man, to think where I was back then. Man, I was sleeping around. I was on my seventh my seventh husband, and I went out in the middle of the day because I didn't think anybody would be there, and there he was, and he spoke to me. He loved me, and now look at me. How about the time when Jesus he got down and wrote in the sand and people started walking away? Oh, here's a good one. When remember when that huge storm hit? Remember when that huge storm hit and like we were all terrified. Like even the fishermen were terrified. And Jesus is just passed out and you hear someone else go, on the cushion. He was asleep on the cushion. Oh man, I remember the cushion. We were so upset about that cushion. Oh man. And the silence falls down across the room. Someone speaks up. You now know him to be Thomas. Oh, hold on. Apparently,
I went too long on my live story. Whoops. Can I add something?
There we go. Sorry, guys. I'm back live on Instagram. Thomas speaks up. And he says, guys, what if none of it was real? He looks up and he says, guys, what if none of this was real? What if sorry, technology is not happy with me right now. What if none of this was real? What if everything that happened, like it was just in our imagination? What if, I don't know, what if none of it's what we thought it was? What if he wasn't who we thought he was? And immediately John speaks up and he's like, whoa, Thomas, no. Of course it was what we thought it was. Of course it was real. He even told us that this was going to happen. He told us that he was going to have to die. Now, dark mood falls back across the room. And everybody just sits there in silence. Until Peter speaks up. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. You sit there and you listen as slowly but surely everyone in the room begins to join him in this prayer. Rest of the day is really just going between tears and hearing stories and learning more about this man who you journeyed with over the past 48 hours. Learning more about this man, Jesus. By the end of the day, you've heard so many stories, you've heard so much about him, that you feel like you know him. You feel like you have been with him for many years, just getting to know him, but just through his friends. Until you realize how late it is, and John comes up to you and he says, hey, look, I know it's late. They've got a place that you can sleep. Sleep here tonight. And so you do. You stay the night. The next morning, you're woken up to a door slamming open and a woman running into the house yelling, he's alive, he's alive. And you, oh my gosh, you won't believe it. I was just at the tomb, Jesus, it's Jesus, he's alive. What? Oh, Jesus is dead. I watched him die. Don't you, he's dead. It's like, no, he's alive. And immediately at this, you see Peter and John stand up and run out of the room, run out of the house. You see people stirring in excitement. And you kind of just look at everyone like, what? Oh, Jesus is dead. these people are crazy. Everything that they said, yes, there's no way those stories are true. Look at them now. So get up and you grab your things. Start to work your way out of the house. And as you're leaving the house, you catch Mary's eye. And she looks at you. She looks so sad. Then a smile breaks across her face and she nods. And you walk out of the house. And you walk back to your home. You put your stuff down. And immediately you hear knocking at the door. You open the door. There's a man who you don't really recognize. Until you hit his eyes. There's no way that it's this man. There's no way. You fall to the ground as tears of joy begin to pour out of your face. And you just think, I wanted him to be alive. I wanted it to be him. I wanted it to be true. And the next thing you feel is Jesus getting down on the ground with you, and hugging you, saying, thanks for walking with me. Thank you for being there for me. I love you. Amen. Guys, thanks for joining me over here for the story of the Triduum. It's been fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. It's one of my favorite stories to not only tell, but it's also one of my favorite stories to, whenever I get to write it, whenever I get to meditate on it. It's just so powerful, and I think that so often we hear the little bits and pieces of the story without receiving the entirety of it. So guys, thank you for joining me over here on Fireside. Have a good one. Peace.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody who joined me in the Zoom call, thank you. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I personally, like I said, I love this story. It's one that means a lot to me. It's a long one, so thank you guys for sticking with me through it. I'm going to hang out in here for a little bit longer, but I do know that I believe that next up we have Good Friday Mass or Good Friday service. So maybe take some time the next 20 minutes to meditate and to pray in preparation for the service. So guys, thank you for joining me. I'll see you over here in case anybody's got any questions or comments. And so I'll stay in the Zoom call because I'm happy to answer any of those. Once again, guys, thank you for joining me. I love you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, AD.
Very welcome.